is an operation that is done on two languages and cultures, right? It becomes inherently a comparative act. So if somebody says I am interested in translation but not interested in comparative literature, does not know what translation is, right? So comparative literature had to be brought in to make canon of Indian literature, right? So the nationalists in India who wanted Indian literature as a category or as a syllabus or a canon, right, had to rely upon comparative literature and translation studies, without which you cannot have Indian literature. And that is why in India, the project of comparative literature was tied up with the question of nationalism, while in the West, it was a kind of critical project which questioned the whole nationalist parochial outlook to literary studies, right? So you can see the contrast here. And that's what Devi is saying. For example, in TYB, I have to teach Indian literature. Then in the syllabus, we have one play called Mudra Rakshas by Hello, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Actually, what has happened is on my PC has dropped. So I have logged in from my phone. Right? Okay. So could you hear what I was saying?
Not after Mudra Rakshas.
Yeah. So if I have to make syllabus for Indian literature, then I have to rely on translation and comparative literature, without which I would not be able to have a syllabus of Indian literature, right? So the nationalist project of having Indian literature has to rely all the times on comparison and translation, right? That is what Devi, and that is the point which Susan Basnett is making, that wherever comparative literature goes, it has its own agendas and issues, right? It cannot have a single agenda and issue. So comparative literature is not a single thing, but a varied set of projects and which are context specific. Something which even Hans Saussy stresses in his essay, that in every time, and in, for example, if comparative literature is practiced in China, then they will have a different set of questions to grapple with. So the object of comparative literature is different in China, is different in India, will be different in Europe, will be different in America, right? I hope you get the point that Hans Saussy is making, and the point that Susan Basnett is making, right? Yeah. I think there is some other meeting. Yeah. So Pankaj, your question?
So, sir, hello. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
So, sir, we can say that uh, if one should try to take regional or national literature to the world literature or to the horizon of world literature, then he or she will need to depend on translation and yeah, on translation.
Do you think so? Do you think that will happen?
Means, I think that will work as per my perception.
Yeah, because whenever you want to take some literature beyond its boundaries, then then it becomes world literature according to some new definitions, which we'll be discussing at length. What is world literature, right? Okay. Any other question? Is it satisfactory or you have some more questions? Pankaj?
Yes, sir, I got that.
The key is to understand translation as a comparative project. Because say for example, you're translating a Gujarati poem into English. Then you are taking into account two cultures and two languages on which you are doing something. Right? You are transferring a text from one language to another. So you are comparing both the languages and both the cultures. You discover that there are no equivalents for certain things. For example, Fafda and jalebi would not have any equivalent in English. So, and you realize the lack of equivalence through comparison. Right? So, Kaka and Mama does not exist in English. It's all uncle and aunt, right? So it's through comparison that you realize the question of equivalence or lack of equivalence. So translation is inherently comparative activity. And that is the reason why we should be, if you say you want to research translation, you are actually researching comparative literature. But Susan Basnett argues it's the other way around, saying that if you want to study comparative literature, translation occupies a center stage now, and comparative is almost displaced by translation studies. That's her argument, and it has definitely some validity. Okay, any other question? I think there are some issues with Teams, it seems, at least at my end. It doesn't seem to be Can you hear what I'm saying? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes. Any other questions, queries, doubts? Or should I ask you questions? Because if you don't have questions, it means that you have understood. And if you have understood, you should be able to able to answer my questions. Right? No. Okay. Nisha has a question. You can unmute yourself, Nisha. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, sir, it's a line by Paul de Man in, I think it was Paul de Man in Saucy's essay. It's about, it's in the section of, I think it was about object of comparative literature or something. So in there, this sentence was mentioned that the linguistics of literariness is a powerful and indispensable tool in this unmasking of ideological aberration as well as determining factor in accounting for their occurrence. So I have some problem with, I cannot grasp the sentence because first of all I don't understand what is linguistics of literariness, and then there is and then I also have a doubt with what exactly is ideological aberration and how it determines the factors of, how it determines the occurrence and how it accounts for it.
So we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so the question is about on page 17, second paragraph, right? And the question is about linguistics of literariness and about the question of ideological aberration. Now, I can give you answer and that would be very easy way out, but I also want you to be self-sufficient in terms of decoding dense complex text. So look at whenever you come across such kind of passages which you are unable to grasp, then the first thing that you should look at is to go backward and forward, right? It is called co-text. Co-text and context, these are the two keys with which you are able to unpack or open up the ideas that you are not able to grasp, right? So this is 17th page, second paragraph. The case, it would be explained either in context and co-text both. So co-text would be paragraph above this paragraph and the paragraphs succeeding this paragraph, right? Okay, so look at the next lines. The cases of critics as different in almost every other respect as Slovinsky, Jakobson, and de Man show the power and attractiveness for comparative literature of concept of literariness. However variously it may be put to work. It's not a concept which promises, it is not a concept for which national and linguistic frontiers or historical epochs matter much. So it promises to wave aside many of the standard objections of comparative research. So what do you mean by linguistics of literariness? What do you mean by linguistics, Nisha? Linguistics यानी क्या है?
Linguistics, I cannot like define it exactly, but it's like study of language and something related to meaning. And then we also studied in Basnet's essay that linguistics is now considered a branch of semiotics. That is as far as I.
But you're also studying other papers where linguistics is taught at MA, syntax wala paper hai shayad, yeah, something like that. Anyway, what linguistics is, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry for interruption. Yeah, actually, I did study linguistics. I mean, separately as well, but like I don't know how to exactly define it. Like it's the study of structures and all that, but I don't know the exact definition.
And the question of literariness, what do you mean by literariness? And linguistics का relation क्या है? Did we discuss it in semester 1?
Yes, we did discuss it in Shlovinsky's essay
So
about
what did we
artistic
discuss?
meaning.
Yes, so what did
I
we
think
discuss?
when we talk about literariness, I mean, in context, when we say that, I mean, it defines it's kind of a demarcation between the text that is considered to be literature and then the text that is not literature. So it's a concept where literariness defines that should one text be considered as literature or not, if I'm not wrong.
No, you are not very wrong. Only just to deepen your understanding, literariness is more about function of a language, how language is used. So the central argument in formalism was language is used in essentially different way from non-literary uses of language, right? And how does it differ was it uses some devices and tropes which are used to defamiliarize your country. Marks literariness. So literariness is defined in terms of how language is used, to put it very simply, right? So linguistics of literariness implies literariness of literature lies in the way language is used. That is one line summary of literariness of linguistics of literariness. And then this idea, which is at the heart of Russian formalism, is criticized and questioned by post-structuralists like Paul de Man. And are you studying post-structuralism at any point?
I guess we have it this semester.
And have you started studying it by any chance?
Not yet.
Okay. So that was one of the reasons why you couldn't get it. Paul de Man is one of the important post-structuralist, deconstructionist critics. And he draws upon the idea of trivium that was used in medieval period and later on in Renaissance and early modernity as well. And those who studied the history of literary criticism with me, right, in semester 5 and 6 of their BA program may remember something about trivium. So I don't know if Soumya, Akshat, and others remember something of trivium. Maybe anyone remembers trivium kya tha? Soumya, Akshat. ट्रिवियम क्या था, किसी को पता है? Yes or no?
Sir, I don't remember.
Okay. What about Soumya? But have you heard something like trivium?
I think I have, but I cannot. I cannot. Anything closer.
Sir, I don't remember either.
Okay. So trivium was the classical paradigm of studying liberal arts. Trivium and quadrivium in the classical period, right? And trivium implied three domains of studies. One was rhetoric, other was grammatica, rhetorica, and dialectica. That three parts structure was called trivium, and quadrivium included mathematics and even music, and I don't know, something like that. So trivium had three subjects. That was the classical syllabi of Greek and Roman times that persisted in the medieval and the early modern period of Western thought. And rhetorica implies what language is used, how is it used to create certain kind of effects upon people and the world, right? And that was rhetoric. So persuasion and all that was rhetoric. Grammatica was study of language as structures, patterns, but also a certain methodology of studying literature. And thirdly, logic or dialectica was study of how to think systematically so as to reach truth. So logic, rhetoric, and grammar was the three-part structure of trivium. And Paul Demand goes on to demonstrate that how the rhetorical component of language puts linguistic, that is grammatical aspect, as well as logical aspects under some kind of suspension. It creates various kinds of aporias or contradictions which cannot be resolved. So rhetorical function of language creates, problematizes meaning structure. So one sentence can have several meanings to it, and you cannot decide which meaning is correct. And the example that he gives is from Archie Bunker and Socratic dialogues as well. For example, Archie is a comic book that was popular probably in America. And he asks, what's the difference, right? So what is the meaning of the sentence? What's the difference? Can anyone tell me, if somebody, when you come across this sentence, what's the difference? So what is the meaning of this sentence?
How does it matter?
How does it matter? That is one meaning of the question, what's the difference? But it can also mean, what is the difference between the two things? So you have offered me tea and coffee, but what's the difference between the two? I don't know. Katia and same. What's the difference between the two? That can also be the meaning. Soumya?
Yes, sir, of course.
Right? So that is another meaning of the sentence, what's the difference? Then the third meaning can be what is meant by the idea of difference, especially in post-structuralism and in the writings of Jacques Derrida. Difference becomes a very important idea. So somebody in the classroom may ask, what is difference? Difference kya hai? So that's the third meaning of the word difference. Right? So it has got three meanings, one sentence, which means logically you cannot prove that this sentence has this meaning. I hope you get it. Nor can you question mark interrogative WH question. So if you do grammatical analysis, फिर भी उसका unambiguous meaning नहीं आएगा आपके पास. If you do logical analysis, then also it won't give you any clear-cut meaning, because the meaning of the sentence, what's the difference, lies in the context in which it is used. I hope you get what I'm saying, which means that the meaning of the sentence and the sentence slip, there is a slippage between signifier and the signified. You get that point? So the point that Paul Deman is trying to make, that aporias cannot be resolved either through grammatical or linguistic or formalist analysis. They cannot be resolved through logic or dialectic, right? And what creates this problem is the rhetorical aspect of the language, that which is context bound, right? So the effect language would have depends on the context. So he is questioning the formalist belief in literariness. So literariness, according to Deman, cannot be a component of literary text, but it has to be found in some form of location or context in which that text exists. So literariness does not exist in structural properties of language, nor does it exist in the logical properties of language, but it exists in rhetorical aspects of language, and that is why it creates a lot of ambivalences and ambiguities. And you cannot have context-free meaning. And in linguistics, very often you have a distinction between context-free and context-sensitive, right? So meaning very often becomes context-specific because of rhetorical or pragmatic dimensions of language. So Paul Deman is questioning the structuralist belief or the Russian formalist belief that literariness is a property of language. He's questioning that. I don't know how many of you could get what I'm saying. How many of you understood what I'm saying? नहीं आया तो पूछ लो. Yeah, Sohan, bolo.
I didn't get you, sir.
I
didn't understand.
So what is it that you don't understand? I will clarify. क्या समझ में नहीं आया बताओ.
The three way of understanding the meaning of a sentence.
Can you come again loudly, bit loudly?
The three approaches of understanding the meaning of a sentence.
Three ways of studying
Meaning of a sentence.
Right. So in ancient Greece and Rome, the core of liberal arts, right? It was called liberal arts because, as Aristotle had argued, that study of arts would help person to become a better citizen and human being, right? So you cannot just teach him the arts which will give him occupation. It was not vocational education. So education is something much more than giving you jobs, right? That is what Aristotle believed. And that is at the heart of the idea of liberal arts. And the syllabus that was usually made was having three aspects. One was called rhetorica. That is, you teach oratory, you teach composition, you teach language skills to get things done using language, right? To persuade people in the court, something called forensic rhetoric. So rhetoric was used in the public fora in Greece because of its political structure being democratic. That means few citizens had a say in the ongoings of the city-state. That was called polis, right? So rhetoric became very important component of Greek and Roman educational system. The second was grammatica, right? Which was largely about study of formal structures of language, but it went beyond that, right? It was about interpretation of texts. It was about larger beliefs of meaning and form of language, and it was called grammatica, and that's where the word grammar comes today from, right? And the third component of the education was logic or dialectica, right? And logic, grammar, and rhetoric were the three important components of knowledge system in the West. Paul Deman is arguing here that study of literature was tied up to one of these very often. For example, during scholastic period, language study of literature was strangely bound up with logic, and during humanistic phase, it was bound up with the study of grammar. So under the broader category of grammar, people studied literary text, and we are talking of the classical times. Paul Deman is arguing that the meaning of any text, whether it is in Socratic dialogues or in comics, cannot be decided on the basis of any one of these, right? If you come across a sentence like "what's the difference," then it may mean several things. It may mean कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता. What's the difference? BA करो या ना करो, क्या फर्क पड़ता है, right? So what's the difference may be क्या फर्क पड़ता है, or it may be genuinely asking. So the first question is called a rhetorical questions. I don't know if you know what is a rhetorical question. क्या फर्क पड़ता है? What's the difference? So you're not supposed to answer it कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, because people say that is accepted. So rhetorical question है या grammatical question है, यानी by doing grammatical analysis of the sentence, subject, verb, object, you cannot reach the meaning of the text, right? It may be something like, what is the difference between iPhone 10 and iPhone 5? Something like that. Or what is the difference between this paper and that paper while making choices about that paper? So what's the difference may mean an actual question कि मुझे बताओ इन दो चीज में क्या फर्क है, दोनों के रेट आप एक ही बता रहे हो मगर क्या डिफरेंस क्या है. So that may be what's the difference may mean that, or it may mean a question asked to philosophers like Derrida. Derrida asked this question, what's the difference, right? And you will study that when you reach post-structuralist component in your literary criticism class, where the question is difference का मतलब क्या है, ये difference क्या चीज है, right? So what's the difference has got three meanings. What's the difference? क्या फर्क पड़ता है. Second is what's the difference, इन दोनों में क्या फर्क है. And third, what's the difference means difference ये क्या चीज है. Explain me idea of difference. So one sentence has got three meanings and none of them are final. They have to be decided on the basis of context. They are context specific. So meaning cannot be considered as context free in language, right? And that is why literature, which relies upon figurative language very often, cannot give you any stable interpretation, fixed interpretation. literary text, more than any other text, creates multiple interpretations which are very often contradictory. And deconstructionists would go on to show how each meaning is uh, uh, aporiac, means you are undecided about what is the meaning of particular text. तो एक टेक्स्ट का एक फिक्स्ड मीनिंग नहीं होता, अनेक मीनिंग्स होते हैं, जिसकी वजह से you cannot say finally this is the meaning of the poem or the novel or even this text. So rhetorical aspects of language destabilizes meaning according to Paul Deman. So literariness becomes a problematic concept. He questions whether literariness can be defined purely in linguistic terms. That is, literariness as a linguistic concept is contested concept, essentially contested concept. Does that clarify something to you, Sohan?
Yes, sir.
And that connects to another question that had come up at the bottom of the same page. I don't know who had asked this question. Literariness, last lines of the next paragraph on page 17. It is not adequately marked the fact that literariness emerges from the context and methods of reading rather than being a property of literature. And it suggests a category slippage between a disciplinary product and a restricted class of objects. This was the question that somebody had asked, right? And so this discussion is actually it's taken forward in this statement. I don't know who had asked this question. Probably Komal had asked this question. मैंने आपको पोस्ट स्ट्रक्चरलिज्म पढ़ा दिया लगे आज, कंपैरेटिव लिटरेचर. Nisha, does that help you to understand? Yeah, the next question was regarding ideological aberrations, right? That was your point. After linguistics of literariness is a powerful and indispensable tool of ideological aberrations as well as determining factors in accounting for their occurrences. That was the question, right, Nisha?
Yes, sir.
So ideological aberrations means the literary studies as it is practiced sees literature as an ideological product, right? Culture studies very often sees literature as ideological, right? Does that make any point? Does that make any sense to you, Nisha? Most of literary studies
Yes,
sees literature as ideological product. But Paul Deman is questioning that you cannot simply read ideology into text because of this rhetorical component of language. By ideology, you may imply what? What do you understand by the term ideology, Nisha?
Sir, ideology, it's kind of like a set of values or beliefs that functions in the society, and it functions unconsciously.
Okay, and it is dependent on something else, right? For example, the values that you have, or I have, or anybody has, are dependent on things like my financial status. Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
So values that you practice in your life, real values that you practice in your life, right, are connected to class, location of the person, right? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
It's also dependent on other kinds of social, historical aspects like gender. Do you think so? That gender has something to do with values?
Yes.
Do you think caste has something to do with values?
Yes.
Right. So dependence of these values on these historical and social inequalities is called ideology, right? So literature is inherently ideological according to culture studies. So feminists would point out how gender plays a role in the ideology that the text promotes, or the ideology that text reveals. Marxists would point out how class plays a role in the way the worldview or values that is embodied in the text is affected by the class, right? And maybe Ambedkarite and sociologists would point out that how caste plays a role in shaping your ideology that is expressed through literature. Paul Timan is questioning that. He's saying that if meaning itself is unstable and there is a constant slippage of meanings in the text because of its rhetorical dimension, how can you very clearly connect text to its historical context? Because meaning itself is unstable. How can you connect text with the context if the meaning of the text is unstable? It keeps on changing according to the context. It is fluid, it's dynamic. So how can you reduce text to its ideological context? I hope you get what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
Right? And that is post-structuralist questioning of cultural studies. So text which we think can reveal us ideology very simply by saying that this text is written by an upper caste male, तो उसके values उसके साथ correlated है. But the text itself is not saying something clearly. It is ambivalent. It is giving multiple readings. Then how can you connect text with the context? That is the question that Paul Timan is posing. Right? On the one hand, he is pointing out how the meaning is so context dependent. At the same time, he is also pointing out that because of this fluidity of meaning, you cannot finally say that this is the meaning of the text. Right? Say, for example, look at the word love that we use, right? You may use it to say, I love idlis, or you may say, I love pets, I love trees, right? I love my parents, I love my boyfriend or girlfriend. Now, in all this context, the meaning of the word changes. Yeah, nah. You don't, when you say, I love pasta, it doesn't mean the same thing as I love my parents. Yeah, nah. Or your boyfriend or girlfriend. So word love itself cannot have a simple, straightforward meaning, but meaning that changes every time you use that in your language. Would you agree to what I'm saying? That's an example of instability of meaning that Paul Deman is talking about.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So, sir, it's what condition does linguistic of literalness become a powerful and indisputable tool which reveals the ideological equation if it is ambivalent and having a fluid form?
Hmm. Hmm. So
So
that
under
is what
which
Paul
condition?
Deman is questioning, because what these people said, that literariness is linguistic, right? Rather than saying that Shakespeare, it's not based on text but on function of language. So people like Jakobson would say that this is the function of language, literariness, right? And so it may exist even in political slogans, it may exist in comics, it may exist in film songs, it may exist in somewhere else, right? So literariness is separated from literary text in the sense that you can find it even in commercial jingles. So according to culture studies, uh, the linguistics of literariness can help you to cut across canonical and non-canonical, high culture as well as low culture. It can allow you to cut across that. That's what is being said by Saucy, right? That's what he's saying. So, and also, how can you then, if you're to follow the line of thought that Paul Deman is following, how can you say that this text has this ideology when its meaning itself is so fluid and unstable? Sohan, does that help you to understand the statement? Nisha and so on,
Yes, indeed.
right?
Yes, sir.
Anyone else has problems? No problems. Marlene, Pooja, Christine, Khadija, Akshat, Soumya, Saisal, Dharti. Any doubts? Any queries? Okay, so questions for all of you. If you can tell me, explain the title of this essay. Exquisite cadavers, tips from fresh nightmares. If you have understood everything, then explain the title. This is your quick test. Who can answer this question? Exquisite cadavers stitched from fresh nightmares of memes, hives, and selfish genes. What does this mean? No one knows the answer. Nobody has questions. So what am I to make of this silence? How do I understand the ambiguity of this silence? So what's the problem that you're not responding? You don't know, you have not understood anything, you are doing something else and no longer interested in classroom. Kya hai? What's the thing? What's up? Or you are doing some spiritual exercise. Kya chal raha hai? What is the meaning of the silence? You're not understood, I can explain you again. You are not getting what I'm saying, or you're not interested, you're interested in other things. Kya hai? Reason kya hai silence ka? Hello, are you there, or you're gone on a mental vacation? Kya hai? You are bored of this. समाधि लग गई है आप लोगों की, क्या है क्या?
Sir, I haven't read it yet, so maybe I'll read it. I'll read it today and I'll get back to you tomorrow. Sorry.
Okay. What about others?
Same, sir.
Okay.
I
So
read, but I did not read it very carefully.
so what is it that you have not got so that we can discuss it? No? Unless you
It's
tell
not
me.
what I've got. It's that when I was reading it, I was not completely into it. So I was distracting again and again. So I haven't read it carefully.
Okay. So you will read carefully today.
Yes, sir. Not today, but because I might have my presentation tomorrow if we go to the next unit. So once I'm done with the presentation, I'll surely read it.
Okay. What about the others who don't have presentations?
Sir, I have read the essay, but I didn't understand the title, what that exactly means.
But you did not even
I was
ask.
very confused.
You did not ask. नहीं समझ में आया तो. So unless you ask, how will I know that you have not understood?
Sir, sorry for that.
No, you are not offending me. I'm just telling you that if you have issues which you don't sort out in class, how will it help you? After all, you are supposed to deal with the thing, right? कल एग्जाम होगी तो आपकी होगी, मेरी नहीं होगी. तो आपको अगर समझ में नहीं आ रही, you are not telling me, then how can we do something about it? That's the thing. That's the basic thing. Struggling to read, yeah. So can you point out where and what is the which are the points which you are struggling to read? And my job, as I have been telling you, is to help you how to read and study, right? And if you have difficulties, my job is to help you resolve those difficulties, right? So, but only thing is that you have to tell me your struggles. So if you have struggles, you tell me, then I can do something about it. It's too long to read and concentrate in one go. Maybe you can break it up into several parts and read beginning, longish essays. But I think this is also one of the important challenges, because our attention span, as it sinks, right, as it shrinks, it also takes a toll on our ability to mental capacity to comprehend. If you are not able to concentrate, so distractions, especially internet, is one big distraction, especially WhatsApp and Instagram can be distracting. So one thing that you can do is that while you're reading, keep these social media away and try to grapple with it. So that is where I think you need to, Sohan, go back and just brush up what you have already read. The second time reading won't be all that full of struggle, because you have already gone through it, right? So there is nothing wrong in doing that. What's wrong in going back and reading again? After all, you are learning how to read, right? You thought that you know how to read, but you don't know how to read the dense intellectual discourses. That's what you are coming here to learn. So, Tehini, keeping social media away can be a good idea, right?
Yes, but actually, I mean, I'm not that addicted to social media as such. But the thing is, I sleep in the middle of reading. I mean, I get too sleepy while reading, because since past 2 years I've not read anything that long, and so that's why my attention span has been sinking day by day.
Very often when we are doing something that we don't like, we fall asleep. We resist something and you feel sleepy about it. ऐसे भी होता है. And yes, out of practice is an important thing. Tight schedule. Well, schedules are going to be tight. Again, it's question of how you manage your time. Okay, so what will we do tomorrow is that you have to come up with your difficulties so that I can do something about it. If you just keep it to yourself, it's like going to a doctor and not telling him what's the problem. Right. It may work in relationships, but it doesn't work in relationship with doctors or somebody who is trying to train you or help you. So come up with your difficulties by tomorrow. And in case you don't find any difficulties, then we'll go ahead with the next presentation. And questions for you is, what is the meaning of the title of Hans Saucy essay and Ted Pressner's essay? If somebody asks you what is digital humanities, तो आप जवाब क्या दोगे? You should be able to answer, no? So tomorrow we'll discuss these questions. So read and come. The title and the titles of both the essays. Yeah, Pankaj, bolo.
Sir, sorry, but I was asking for one suggestion that if possible, that if you will provide us some questions, that covers the essays, so it will help us that, to look or to what to look.
Right. So the first question is, explain the title of the essay, Exquisite Cadavers Stitched from Fresh Nightmares, Memes, Hives and Selfish Gene. Question number 1. Question number 2 is, what according to Todd Pressner is the relationship between comparative literature and digital humanities? These are the two questions. What is the relation between comparative and literature and digital humanities in future? You want to write down?
Yes, sir.
The third question
Yes, sir.
can be, what are the challenges before comparative literature according to Hans Saucy in the age of globalization? What are the challenges before comparative literature in the age of globalization according to Hans Saucy? Yeah, so again, there was a call drop. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So what I said was, those who have taken down these 3 questions can put them in the group so that others can also read them, right? Are the questions clear? Explain the title of Hans Saucy essay. Second is, explain the title of Todd Pressner essay. And third is, what are the challenges before comparative literature in the age of globalization according to Hans Saucy? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So we meet tomorrow. Okay, so have a good day and take care. We have extended our time schedule. So I'm stopping for today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.